Discover the amazing transformation of a beggar, how one mindset shift changed everything. Jake nestled against the cold brick of a forgotten storefront, clutching his tattered architectural sketchbook, memories of dream-filled designs now encased in dust. Once a celebrated architect, he was now a shell of his former self, crowded out by the world's indifference. The autumn air wove through the streets, a reminder of the hard-fought days of the past when determination and resilience defined him, instilled in him by the warmth of his beloved grandmother. But personal tragedies had turned his life into a landscape of despair, each loss layering over the last, dissolving his dreams into shadows. The memories felt like a tightening noose, squeezing his heart in a vice of regret and sorrow. Why should I even try? His mind swirled with doubt, the weight of rejection pinning him down. A visceral ache surged within him, visions of his former life tugged at the fringes of his consciousness. He wrestled with the images of his ex-wife and the bitter silence that followed their divorce, the emptiness that filled the void left by his grandmother's passing, and the harsh reality of being jobless. Each memory felt heavy, pulsating with loss, doubling as a reminder that hope had escaped him like the evening sun disappearing behind the horizon. He felt like a beggar not just for money, but for purpose, for validation. Just then, a shadow fell across him, interrupting his spiral of despair. A bright-eyed college student, Lily, peered down at him, curiosity lighting her face. "What are you working on?" she asked, her voice warm and inviting. In that moment, something inside him flickered a spark of connection, an ember of recognition. As he hesitated, Jake's heart raced, caught in a tempest of vulnerability. Should he reveal his dreams or mold them into silence, like so many other times? "I used to be an architect." His words struggled to break free, as if the sheer act of speaking could shatter a long-held image of worthlessness. He recounted his hopes and dreams, each sketch in his book a frozen moment of despair and longing. He seen pity in her eyes. After all, who was he but a beggar clinging to the past? Yet, Lily leaned in, her curiosity morphing into genuine emotion as she listened. With every thoughtful question, she challenged him to envision a different path, a community housing project, a chance to uplift rather than retreat. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake felt the ember ignite into a flame, the idea of rekindling his passion blossoming against his better judgment. But as he prepared for the next steps, he found himself grappling with a haunting question: could a man like him, a man lost in the depths of struggle, reclaim his place in the world? Doubt seeped into his bones like the chill of the autumn wind. Would he be met with skepticism, dismissive glances from those who once looked up to him? He envisioned Tom's smug face, now the successful leader of a construction firm, ready to tear apart any aspirations he dared to voice. Tension coiled inside him like a coiled spring. Would anyone believe in him again? Would they see the remnants of the man he once was, or the beggar they had passed just moments ago? The gravity of that moment froze him in place, pushing his pulse to a nervous staccato. Anxiety twisted in his gut, but hope glimmered, fighting for a foothold. He could hear the whisper of his grandmother's voice urging him to press on, to challenge the judgment that threatened to ensnare him. Standing at the precipice, heart racing and throat dry, Jake glimpsed the walls of his former life begin to crack, exposing a faint light on the other side. As he prepared for the upcoming meeting, he felt the weight of fear settle on him like a shroud. The room would be filled with sharp glances and suspicion, but as he imagined himself standing before them and speaking, he couldn't shake off the tight knot of dread. Just as he opened his mouth to propose, the bold vision swirling in his head, the pained silence swallowed him whole, leaving him and everyone watching teetering at the edge of a vast uncertainty. Jake stood frozen, battling the creeping dread that blanketed his resolve. The world felt impossibly large as he surveyed the faces in the room: designers, investors, critics. Each one gazed at him expectantly, eyes restless with judgment. He sensed the stakes were higher than a mere presentation. This was a chance to reclaim not just his voice but the very essence of his identity. His breath hitched as he remembered the words of his grandmother, "Courage is the key to every door." It had always been easier to float in the shadows, to allow others to define him. But now, standing on the precipice of a second chance, he had to confront the gnawing fear that threatened to silence him once more. What if they see me as just a beggar? The thought echoed in his mind, but another part, however small, whispered back. What if they see the vision? He couldn't allow the whispers of his past to drown out the urgency of his present. The sketches that had once brought him joy now represented not just dreams, but a roadmap to revival. He could visualize the community project blossoming in the hearts of those who needed it most. A vision for homes that embraced connection, a sanctuary shielded from judgment. That could be his gift. With renewed determination, Jake clenched his sketchbook tightly, its worn pages bulging with hope and ambition. He focused on the potential before him, giving himself permission to step into the light. "Excuse me," he said suddenly, his voice surprising even him. The room fell noticeably quieter, the ripple of expectation palpable as he began to unfold his vision. "Today, I want to share an idea, a community housing project that's not just about structures, but souls." Allowing himself to stand a little taller, he articulated his thoughts with startling clarity. With each word, he wove a tapestry of necessity. He laid the foundation showing that he was still the architect he once was. The audience leaned in, curiosity ignited. This open space provided him a glimpse of validation. He was not just there to be judged but to be listened to. The shadows that loomed above him began to recede, replaced by an environment ripe for dialogue, yet, the weight of skepticism still lingered. As he explained the logistics and community impact of his concept, Jake couldn't ignore Tom's insidious smirk emerging in his peripheral vision. The same Tom who had once gushed about Jake's ideas and then turned them against him. The memory of their past came rushing back, urging him to retreat. But he steadied himself, refocusing on his sketches. Each line was a testament to his resilience, each concept a reclaiming of lost dignity. Building homes is more than construction, it's about nourishing community, fostering connection, Jake continued, his voice lifting. This is about building a future where no one feels like a beggar, where pride can thrive alongside hopes. The air in the room thickened, a mixture of skepticism and intrigue hovering like sweet anticipation. Jake sensed the tide shifting. Just as quickly as curiosity had taken hold, doubt began to bubble. Tom's condescending gaze sharpened, and Jake swiftly picked up on the disdain lingering in the air. "If a man like you can dream, then surely anyone can," Tom scoffed, cutting through Jake's moment. The laughter that rippled through the audience felt like a trap snapping shut around his aspirations. Yet within that laughter lay a new kind of energy. It wasn't merely ridicule. They were weighing the invitation to dream alongside him. Did he dare believe they might come with him after all, or would they strap blinders on and confine him back into obscurity? For a moment, he hesitated, the choice laying heavy in his mind. With the weight of Tom's challenge echoing within him, Jake realized he was faced with more than a mere presentation. It was time for a personal showdown, not just with Tom, but with every doubting voice within him. As the silence resurfaced, he prepared to elevate his argument further, knowing he had come too far to back down now. The moment had arrived to confront his demons, both internal and external. Would this meeting become the turning point of his transformation, or would he crumble under the pressure? Jake's heart raced, each beat driving him deeper into the intensity of the moment. The murmurs around him faded into a distant hum, and in that fragile silence, he realized something vital. This wasn't just a defense of his idea, it was a battle for his very self. Each second stretched thin, and the boundaries between doubt and belief began to blur. Was he truly capable of igniting this spark of connection, of becoming ignited himself? "You're not just here to pitch an idea, Jake," he reminded himself, grounding the tumult within. It was a challenge to bring forth a part of him long buried under layers of apprehension and regret. Sweat trickled down the nape of his neck, but he resisted the urge to wipe it away. This was no time for distraction. Instead, he focused on the present, the reality that clarity could transform the crowd's collective gaze from skepticism to belief. Let us think differently, he said, his voice more steady now. Imagine this housing not as mere bricks and mortar but as a vessel, a crucible of human experience. The tenants become the architects of culture, of joy, of resilience. Each phrase ignited a flicker of recognition among a few faces. Did they see it? Perhaps they could envision something beyond walls, but Tom's derisive laugh echoed again, a sting he had almost forgotten, and it ignited something within him. Yes, a beggar can dream and so can you. Why not consider that those dreams might hold more weight than you think? Jake's pulse quickened, defiance bubbling under his skin. Jake noticed the tension shift in the air when he called back to one of his first sketches, a shared space within the design that encouraged communal gatherings, exchanging narratives over meals shared. He felt the crowd leaning forward, curiosity piqued. It was time to weave vulnerability into vision. Look, he continued, gesturing towards the sketches that had once seemed to mock him. This space isn't just to reside. It's where people will gather to create stories, where loneliness gets dissolved in laughter and communal dreams take root. It's about fostering a culture of compassion, a chance to dedicate ourselves to those around us, where we continually grow. He recalled moments from his life when connections had been forged through shared spaces, flaring up friendships over simple meals that emerged alongside vibrant discussions. As he met the eyes of the audience, he recognized that each of them had, at one point, craved community just as he did. But a nagging sensation whispered caution: what if his vulnerability faltered instead of fortifying? What if they choose to ridicule rather than resonate? The fears bubbled like a vessel at its boiling point, but Jake fought them down. This was a new path, one with walls shaped by faith, not confines shaped by judgment. Jake's voice crescendoed, lifting the room toward a shared vision rather than a detached critique. We all long for connection, and I want us to build a place where that connection can flourish. A few nods danced in the dimmed light, and he realized he was no longer standing alone. For the first time, it wasn't just his challenge, it was an invitation for others to partake in his journey. The energy shifted again, deeper this time, as he felt resistance wane. Could he truly transcend mere existence? The pressure of Tom's derision lessened, replaced by a different kind of uncertainty within himself. Would he emerge not just as an architect of designs but as one of change? As Jake glanced at Tom, he caught a mixture of incredulity and surprise on his face. Perhaps, just perhaps, the specter of disdain could transform into a catalyst for admiration. As the presentation built to its peak, he realized he was not merely convincing others, he was forging a new identity from the ashes of doubt that had previously defined him. But his doubt still lingered, and the ultimate test loomed ahead. What would happen when Tom inevitably struck back with a calculated attack as he always had? Would he find the strength to defend his dreams further, or would he slip back into obscurity? Jake took a breath, knowing the next few moments could shape everything, and awaited Tom's expected response, ready to confront his greatest adversary. The room held its breath as Jake faced Tom. Time slowed, and Jake's thoughts raced. He felt the warmth of his recent clarity but knew it could quickly erode under the weight of criticism he had come to expect from his rival. Are you seriously suggesting we build a utopian fairy tale? Tom challenged, his voice dripping with cynicism. Do you really think people will gather happily to share meals and stories? This isn't a dream where everyone holds hands around a campfire. It's reality, and you need to face it. With each of Tom's words, the crowd turned, their expectation of conflict shifting to apprehension. Jake's heart thudded harder against his ribcage. Defensiveness bubbled up, but he knew that simply countering Tom with anger would only serve to reinforce his rival's position. Instead, he took a measured breath, feeling the ground beneath him shift as he prepared to stand firm. Tom, I understand skepticism, Jake replied, his voice calm yet resolute. But isn't it just as unrealistic to expect this space to perpetuate the same isolation and division we see in so many communities? What if we dared to create a haven instead? He let the question linger, hoping to spark a flicker of doubt in Tom's unwavering conviction. As the audience began to buzz with a collective energy, Jake realized the power of faltering their preconceptions was not in his blueprints but in his passion. We can either settle for fractured relationships, people living alongside each other but never truly connecting, or we can innovate. Why not choose to build a community where everyone belongs and feels valued? Tom's expression changed, something akin to annoyance flaring in his eyes. Noble words, Jake, but they won't pay the bills. Your ideals mean nothing without reality backing them. You need infrastructure, budgets, real plans, he shot back, armed with the artillery of pragmatic realities. The word struck deep, igniting Jake's fraying insecurities. He felt the sting, but underlying that vulnerability was a new sense of resolve. This was his turning point. He could retreat into the shadows of self-doubt or embrace the challenge head-on. He decided to lean into his discomfort. We can achieve both, Tom, Jake began, the fire in his belly rising. It's about intervention. Not just physical structures, but the ethos behind them. We take the realities of living and inject meaning. Infrastructure can support love, not just shelter. The room shifted slightly, the once skeptical energy transforming into tentative curiosity. He felt the attention on him tighten, the room leaning in. For the first time, he noticed there were more allies than he thought, and maybe his vision was shared more widely than he believed. Then he heard a whisper from the back of the room, a comment hushed but inquisitive. What does that look like, Jake? Sharing life in this new home? That opened a door. Imagine shared garden spaces, he said, the words flowing, or workshops where people tap into their talents together. An artist collaborating with a plumber, each can enrich the other's life through their own work. It creates an ecosystem of support and learning. Jake's excitement built as he envisioned people gathering, inspired by the warmth and potential that could exist. Further, as visions coalesced in his mind, he thought of the isolation he had once felt, always detached, looking in from the edges. What if we funded communal mentorship programs to provide pathways for the underprivileged? Developing skills as well as community ties. In that moment, the air shifted again, and he sensed a possibility beyond Tom's derision. An identity forged not only from critique but possible collaboration. Yet, beneath that hope simmered a new fear: would he stoke the flames of his own vulnerability too far? As he watched Tom's face darken, the tension of the impending conflict intensified, casting a shadow over his budding conviction. How far had he truly come? And would the monetary drive of the practical world crush his dreams with the next words that left Tom's lips? Jake poised himself, knowing the answer would beckon the challenge, daring him to define the very essence of his aspirations. Would this moment solidify his ambition, or would he falter once again? The outcome hung precariously, teetering on the precipice, ready to plunge into uncharted depths. Jake stood at the crossroads of ambition and apprehension, the weight of the crowd's gaze bearing down on him like a physical force. Tom's words echoed in his mind, primal fears weaving their way through his thoughts. It was as if 1,000 voices of doubt whispered in unison, demanding to know whether he was truly ready to confront reality and make his ambitions tangible. He shifted his weight, grounding himself. He knew that retreating into silence would betray everything he had just proposed. This was not merely about defending an idea, it was about building a new identity, his identity. Each heartbeat pulsed with resolve. As the murmurs subsided, silence filled the room, thick and expectant. Jake, Tom interjected, voice sharper now, it's wonderful to talk about togetherness, but what happens when your utopia collapses? What happens then? The question hovered like a dark cloud. He felt the impulse to falter, yet he forced himself to meet Tom's gaze head-on. When was the last time you took a risk? Jake countered, his voice unwavering. What if falling down wasn't the failure, but an opportunity to rise stronger? If the system as it stands breeds isolation, what makes you certain it won't collapse under its own weight? We have a chance to redefine success. A flicker of surprise crossed Tom's face, perhaps an inkling of respect, or was it irritation? Either way, the crowd seemed to respond, their apprehension waning, replaced by a subtle, burgeoning interest. Jake capitalized on this shift, allowing his passion to unfurl without restraint. Each word felt like a stepping stone solidifying his path. Imagine a place that attracts people, not just with amenities but with a sense of belonging. A park not only for leisure but for spontaneous gatherings, where ideas flow and friendships form in an organic tapestry. Isn't that worth pursuing? The audience began to nod in agreement, some exchanging glances filled with understanding. As the walls of skepticism began to crumble, Jake felt the spaces within himself expand, the seeds of self-belief taking root. The tension in the room gradually shifted, threading curiosity with the air. It was time to reveal another layer of his vision. And beyond community gardens, what if we provided resources to those who want to turn their dreams into viable businesses? Imagine workshops where those once considered hopeless now launch startups and change their destinies. This isn't just pipe dreaming, it's about changing lives. Jake's own experiences washed over him, the nights spent as a child dreaming of escape, how he had underestimated the power of hope and vision. He cultivated those moments now, pulling from the times he had stood invisible on the fringes. Then, without realizing it, he acknowledged a truth about himself. The uncertainty he felt mirrored the discomfort of others, yet it was also a source of strength. Hadn't he, himself, emerged from the depths, redefining his reality? Each revelation sharpened his narrative. Suddenly, a voice broke through the ripple of excitement. But how do you fund this vision, Jake? You need capital to make these dreams a reality. The crowd shifted again, both intrigued and skeptical, and for a fleeting moment, fear sliced through his confidence. Yet, he steadied his heartbeat, supposing that vulnerability could unlock paths. The truth is, he began, that crowdfunding isn't just about money. It's about belief, connection. Every contribution, no matter how small, becomes a brick in our foundation. It's not just financial support, it's community investment in a new way of living. He sensed it then, the palpable change in the room. Tom, staunch and seemingly unyielding, appeared less credible in the light of their collective curiosity. Perhaps this was a fertile ground for ideas he hadn't even thought of yet. Time slowed as Jake realized the transformative potential not just for others, but for himself. This was no longer simply about a project, it was about self-actualization, about stepping into the person he was meant to be. But as admiration took root among his newfound supporters, another thought nudged at him. Could he really provide what he envisioned, or would doubt coalesce into a paralyzing force? Pressing forward, he took a deep breath, ready to break into an unknown but necessary chapter of confrontation. The moment hung heavy, waiting for resolution. The challenge before him loomed larger than Tom's words. It beckoned a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Jake realized the next pivotal choice lay with him. Would he grasp the potential swirling around him or retreat to safety? The question tangled in his thoughts, compelling him toward the next fork in his journey. Jake took a step back, feeling the electric charge of anticipation reverberate through the crowd. That question, nagging at the edges of his confidence, weighed heavier than ever. Did he truly have what it took to turn dreams into reality, or was this merely the bravado of a man filled with hope but lacking the means to deliver? The air held a tension that crackled with both possibility and fear. With a newfound determination, Jake leaned into his own inner dialogue, questioning the fear that threatened to bubble up. The self-doubt felt familiar, yet there was a flicker of an unfamiliar response stirring in his chest. What if failure wasn't the descent he feared, but merely the foundation upon which he could build something greater? Gathering his thoughts, he carried the full weight of the moment, embracing the discomfort of uncertainty that he straightened his posture and met the gaze of the audience anew, shaking off the remnants of doubt. What if instead of asking if I can do this, we ask, who can do this with me? Imagine a collective effort, a band of believers pushing through the walls of tradition. We aren't just divining funds, we're igniting passion, allowing people to believe in themselves when they've been told they could not succeed. The crowd stirred, excitement lacing their breaths as they leaned in closer, almost conspiratorial in their shared interest. Jake felt the rhythm of his heart quicken, buoyed by their engagement. This was something different. This was hope in action, a community of potential just waiting for a spark. Let us not forget, he continued, drawing them into his vision, that bravery isn't the absence of fear but the will to take that next step despite it. His voice carried the weight of every moment he had spent yearning for a purpose, and he realized he was speaking not just to them but to himself. Questions flitted through Jake's mind. What if he framed vulnerability as strength? What if he shared his experiences, exposed his journey for others? He had been raised to believe that showing weakness was contrary to success. There had always been a chasm between ambition and honesty, a misconception he now felt compelled to bridge. "Let me be real with you," he challenged, feeling the subtle shift in the crowd's energy. "I've stood at the brink of failure. I've tasted defeat and desperation. But through these moments, I've discovered the power of community, of shared dreams and collaborative efforts. If I can rise from that, imagine what we could achieve together." He could feel the belief fortifying within him, as if each spoken word layered the foundation of that burgeoning identity he was forging. Unshed tears lurked just beneath the surface, realizing this journey was not only about what he envisioned for others but about redefining his own narrative. Yet, the haunting question lingered: was this all a facade? Would he genuinely be able to manifest this collective transformation, or was he, too, setting himself up to fall? And if he succeeded, what part of himself would he lose along the way? As Jake weighed these challenges, a new uncertainty crept in. He abruptly recognized the weight beneath Tom's skepticism. Was it really just doubt, or was it a reflection of his own fear of inadequacy? The thought was jolting. Uncompromisingly personal, it nudged at the very identity he was carving out. The realization that he needed to confront not just external obstacles but his own flawed perceptions created an urgency inside him that he glanced over at Tom, whose expression seemed to oscillate between skepticism and intrigue. This was it, the moment was now. Jake could either retreat to the shadows of self-doubt or step boldly into the light of self-discovery and communal authenticity. Taking a deep breath, he steadied himself, fully aware that this pivotal moment was not merely a presentation. It was an initiation into a new reality, one that would challenge every preconceived notion he clung to. As momentum surged within him, one thought became crystal clear: to alter the course of his life and others, he would have to confront everything: his fears, his doubts, and that nagging voice that warned him success might slip through his fingers. Would he embrace the necessary shift, or would he find himself backing down just when the stakes had never been higher? The horizon beckoned tantalizingly, but was he ready for the sacrifice that would come with making it a reality? Jake felt the weight of the moment shift as he completed his speech. The cheers from the crowd faded, replaced by the echo of his own heartbeat drumming in his ears, a reminder that he was teetering on the edge of something profound. The fear of failure battled with the exhilarating promise of change, and he was desperate for clarity. Stepping off the stage, he was abruptly confronted by Tom. The skepticism that had lingered in Tom's eyes twisted into something more palpable: curiosity mingled with doubt. It was a captivating pitch. "Jake, but what's your real plan?" Tom's words sliced through the heady post-speech excitement, grounding Jake back to reality. "Real plan?" Jake repeated, trying to suppress the flutter of anxiety that surged. "I want to create something meaningful. A space where people can come together, believe in themselves, and collaborate on something greater than any individual dream." He felt a flicker of doubt dart through him, spurred by Tom's piercing gaze. "Sounds great on paper. But how do you intend to manage the inevitable setbacks? Because it won't be all uplifting messages and success stories." Tom leaned closer, his tone shifting. "You need to understand that people will resist change. How do you handle that?" The question rang in Jake's mind long after Tom walked away. It was a cruel reminder that dreamers often flounder without pragmatic strategies. He sat down on a bench outside, ephemerally distanced from the people milling about, their lives continuing in blissful oblivion of the internal turmoil brewing inside him. What if envisioning success was only the beginning? A voice within urged him to deconstruct his broad ambitions. What was he truly capable of achieving right now? If he were to face the steep slopes of doubt and opposition, would he be equipped to navigate the journey? With determination rekindling, he began to outline plans in his mind. He envisioned a structured approach, a roadmap to success that included milestones and buffers for unexpected obstacles. "I need to break it down," he murmured to himself, summoning resolve. First, he aimed to construct a framework, a safe space where people felt empowered to share ideas, failures, and triumphs alike without judgment. He could cultivate workshops focused on skill sharing and mentorship, pairing experienced individuals with newcomers eager to learn. But what if people showed up and left, unbothered by his vision? The thought stung. He would need to ignite a sense of belonging, turning mere participation into a commitment. Beyond his original speech, he needed to adjust his narrative to share his own vulnerability and failures more earnestly to foster trust and connection. As he stitched these thoughts together, small threads of possibility began to stitch an image of what his vision could become. Each element was a reflection of his own journey, a commitment not only to others but to himself as he stepped onto this path of creation. He had to become a model of resilience. Jake jolted back into reality, his heart racing as clarity forced out the fog of doubt. He realized he wasn't merely searching for collaboration, he was offering a piece of himself, a shared journey of honesty. "Wait, what am I doing?" he whispered, resisting the urge to rewrite his ambitions entirely in response to fear. This process couldn't be hurried, it required time, patience, and an unwavering commitment to his newfound path, yet, just as he felt his vision crystallize, a new dilemma sparked. He would soon need to present this concept not just to Tom, but to a wider audience. How would he address their skepticism? Would they embrace his vision or challenge him to prove it? The adrenaline coursing through him turned to a resolve he didn't realize he possessed. He had questions, and they were critical. He needed to figure out how to address barriers head-on while still being authentic to his mission. As Jake made plans for the next meeting, an unshakable fear gripped him. Facing the very people who might not believe in him could feel like gallows humor. But standing at the precipice of change, he understood the stakes were high. To rise, he needed to challenge not only the doubts from others but his own lingering uncertainty. Now, with a clearer vision facing him, Jake braced himself for the confrontation that lay ahead. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the walls he built around himself toppling down take his aspirations with them? The moment loomed, and he was ready to confront the truth. Was he more than a dreamer? Jake immersed himself in preparation, scouring notes and drafting his presentation to refine clarity and intention. He aimed to confront the inevitable skepticism head-on. Late nights blurred into early mornings as he wrestled with the static of his doubts. Each word penned on paper became an exercise in vulnerability, the very essence of the connection he sought to create with his audience. He discovered that by sharing his own uncertainties, he could resonate with others on a level deeper than mere ambition. During this process of self-examination, he stumbled upon subtle yet profound shifts in his mindset. The narrative he crafted wasn't just about a grand vision, it was about the journey, the resilience built through failures. Jake had been so focused on achieving some distant point of success that he had overlooked the strength of his own story, the moments of hesitation that led to small victories. With this newfound clarity, he found himself reflecting on his previous encounters with rejection, the moments that shaped him. They weren't just setbacks, they were stepping stones, providing valuable lessons on what truly mattered. How would he translate this transformation into his presentation? He needed to illustrate the authentic process of growth, underscoring the importance of vulnerability and belonging. As the days slipped by, he visualized the room packed with listeners, some eager for inspiration, others armed with skepticism. How would he ignite a spark in the disbelievers? They couldn't be won over with platitudes or clichés. He realized he needed to confront their doubts directly, illustrating not just what he wanted but why it mattered. People have fears, I have fears. Let us face them together, he practiced aloud, pacing in front of a mirror. It wasn't just a catchphrase, it was a premise of collective growth. If his mission was authenticity, then embracing fear became a common ground. Instead of shying away from opposition, he would lay bare his own trepidation amidst the journey. However, questioning his authenticity due to absolute truth gnawed at him. Would revealing layers of himself lure people in, or would it create distance? What if the acknowledgement of his insecurities made them lose faith in him as a leader? Each strategic thought collided with doubt, but he pushed forward. The juxtaposition of hope and uncertainty fueled his desire to defeat self-imposed limitations. The date approached rapidly, and with it, an undercurrent of panic rushed in like a tide. Would the room chant his praises or scoff at his ambition? Yet, with that panic also simmered the embers of determination. Jake recognized the importance of channeling his fear into something constructive. He began to envision the moment where his words cut through the skepticism and landed with honesty. The day of the presentation dawned bright yet foreboding. Standing in front of the mirror one last time, he practiced deep breathing, reciting his purpose: I am here to connect. He adjusted his tie, a small act, but it echoed the preparation he had put forth. When he stepped into the room, a wave of varied eyes met him, a crucial mix of hopeful faces and skeptical ones, some floating in indifference. The time had come to face them. He paused, scanning the crowd, the buzz in the air palpable. And then he spoke, his voice steady despite the rapid pulse in his chest. I know you're all here with your stories, doubts, and aspirations. I stand here before you, not just to share a vision, but to share my journey, the raw, unvarnished truth of it. He felt the shift in the atmosphere as he began to articulate his struggles, laying bare vulnerabilities that churned within. As he shared not just his dreams but the stumbling blocks that fueled them, he watched some hesitant faces soften and nod. But just as he found his groove, an unexpected question pierced through. How can you expect us to follow your lead if your own path seems so uncertain? A voice challenged. The immediate tension rippled through the audience like a knot tightening. Jake's heart raced, but he realized this was the confrontation he had been preparing for. How would he answer? Would he retreat into the comfort of ideals or embrace the reality of struggle he passionately preached? He steadied himself, knowing he was no longer just presenting, he was defining the contours of leadership through authenticity. The moment hung heavy in the air. Would he crumble under the challenge, or could he exploit this very vulnerability to solidify his mission? It was the all-too-familiar wall of fear, and he was determined to break through it, not just for others, but for himself. In that instant, everything shifted again. Jake saw not just the room before him but the vast and transformative potential that existed if he embraced his path, uncertainties and all. The confrontation had only just begun. Jake inhaled deeply, grounding himself in the moment. This was not just a question, it was an opportunity to reaffirm his commitment to the path he had embarked upon. He could feel the weight of every moment that had brought him here, each failure a brushstroke in the portrait of his evolution. Uncertainty is a part of every journey, he replied, his voice resonating with conviction. If you look closely, you will see that the road less traveled is often fraught with doubt, yet it's precisely where the most meaningful transformations occur. I am not perfect, I am a work in progress, just like each of you. He noticed a ripple of interest within the audience, eyes flickering with contemplation. The challenge of the question had shifted from an antagonistic prod to a bridge connecting him to their shared fears. With each moment, he found himself more emboldened and less tethered to the critical voices that once paralyzed him. As he continued, connecting the narrative of his life through the lens of his struggles, he began uncovering nuances about himself that had lain dormant beneath layers of conformity. In my darkest moments, I had a choice to retreat into the shadows of doubt or to step forward, driven by the prospect of learning. Each setback wasn't a dead end but rather a redirection toward growth. Sweat trickled down his temple, but he was invigorated by the authenticity that now flowed through him. The visceral energy in the room changed, leaning into a collective pulse of understanding. Some faces in the crowd softened, visibly wrestling with their own internal conflicts, while others appeared more emboldened, ready to confront what lay ahead. How do you define success? Another voice interrupted, filled with skepticism but underlined with genuine curiosity. It pulled at Jake's focus, cutting through the moment. He paused, seized by the question's weight. What did success mean to him now? It had transformed from mere accolades into a tapestry woven from experiences both glorious and grim. Success, he began, is no longer about reaching a destination, it's about the resilience to keep moving forward despite the obstacles that emerge. It's about the connections we make while navigating the treacherous terrain of life. With every word, he began to reshape not just his image but also his reality. The journey of personal growth blossomed into a new philosophy, not an unyielding pursuit of perfection but an embrace of imperfection as a gateway to understanding. In that charged atmosphere, he recognized that this wasn't solely about him anymore, it represented a pivot for others as well. Could his acceptance of himself, flaws and uncertainties encourage someone else to shed their masks, even just a little? He continued delving deeper into his revelations. Every rejection, every misstep, it all led me to this very moment, the opportunity to connect with you. I ask you not for your blind faith but for your realness as we stand together on unknown ground. The energy in the room was electric, shifting from doubt to a contemplative openness. He could see a dialogue brewing in the audience, faces exchanging glances filled with newfound curiosity. In his heart, he sensed that perhaps, just perhaps, this was a beginning, not an end, but there was one last hurdle to overcome. The impending question hung in the air like a storm cloud. What if you fail again? A voice piped in, louder now, commanding attention. This was the voice of every critic he had faced, a question stemming from fear itself. Jake felt the ground quake beneath him as uncertainty flared anew, threatening to undo the progress he had demonstrated. However, internally, he grappled with a surge of gratitude for the opportunity to confront it head-on. Failure. It was all too familiar, yet a necessary component of growth. What if I do? He countered softly, yet firmly. What if I fail? The reality is that I will, but therein lies the beauty of the journey. In each failure lies the seed for learning, wisdom. So I choose to embrace it, to lean into it, rather than fear it. With that response, he felt the room resonate, an echo of agreement, a shared bond deepening. The fear he had faced that day metamorphosed into an affirmation of resilience. As he concluded, applause erupted, mixing with renewed excitement from corners of the audience. He had shifted the internal landscape from skepticism to an invitation for conversation. But quietly, a disconnect lingered at the back of his mind. Jake had stepped forward into an arena of vulnerability, yet he would soon face the shadows that accompanied this new light, past failures looming with the potential to ambush him in moments of doubt. Would he be equipped to face them again, or would those shadows eclipse the recognition he had just begun to embrace? The questions lingered, whispering doubt into the triumph he had felt. After all, the journey towards authenticity rarely followed a simple path. As the applause faded, he realized this was just the beginning of a deeper confrontation, not only with his audience but with himself. What awaited him on this next chapter of resilience? The room buzzed with a palpable energy as Jake stood at the threshold of transformation. The applause faded, yet the echoes of his earlier doubts resounded within. There was no denying the shift he felt, the exhilarating sense of collective curiosity had emerged, but could he truly sustain it? Breathe, he reminded himself, eyeing the audience whose faces reflected a spectrum of emotions from skepticism to intrigue. This was his moment, and he could either retreat into the comfort of familiar uncertainty or step boldly into this newly forged chapter of his life. With renewed determination, Jake stepped away from the podium, closing the distance between him and the audience. I want to share not just a vision, but the reality that comes from vulnerability and authenticity, he began, his voice steady and measured. Together, we can redefine the narrative that surrounds failure. He paused, observing the slight shifts in body language as the crowd began to lean in. The same individuals whose doubts had previously weighed on him were now appearing more open, perhaps even eager to engage. It's about more than creating a community, it's about creating a culture where we acknowledge our struggles and build each other up, embracing our imperfections as stepping stones towards growth. With each word, he could feel his confidence solidifying. The sketches in his mind began to take shape, not just as architectural designs but as metaphors for resilience. Imagine a space where sharing ideas isn't met with judgment, but with understanding, a space cultivated from our collective experiences. As he spoke, a ripple of recognition moved through the audience. For the first time, Jake saw potential allies emerging, faces illuminating with belief. Members of the room nodded in agreement, something profound was taking root. He found they were eager to be part of this movement, forging a new path together. Let us initiate the change we seek, he continued. We have the ability to craft a reality far greater than our fears. With each step we take towards community, we're not just erecting walls. We're building a sanctuary that nurtures growth and inspires countless dreams. Tom's earlier disdain felt diminished, almost like a forgotten relic, as Jake's words resonated more loudly than self-doubt. This journey won't always be pretty. There will be setbacks, and there will be moments when we feel lost again. Jake's heart raced, adrenaline surging through him. He had crossed an invisible barrier from ambition to authenticity. Deep within, something shifted. He felt anchored in his truths, in a way he had never anticipated. No longer merely a speaker, he was now an architect of connection, paving the way for a path that transcended his own experience. I ask you to believe in not just me but in yourself, too. Let us tool our dreams together and transform them into a shared reality. Anytime you stumble, lean on others. Reach out, share your vulnerabilities. His voice rang with conviction, a fervor flowing like a thread weaving the audience closer together. The once familiar echoes of doubt dulled, crashing against the tides of emerging solidarity. Jake felt like he was becoming the person he had always imagined, gaining recognition not only for his vision but for his transformative courage. As the presentation concluded, the applause that erupted felt profound, not just as validation, but as a shared acknowledgement of the work that lay ahead. It was in that moment Jake knew he had transcended his own limitations. For the first time, his accomplishments as a man, redefined beyond mere professional labels, emerged as reminders of the power of collaboration and vulnerability. Standing amidst those who now believed, he felt liberated, a core of solid confidence pulsing through him. No longer just a dreamer but a community leader, his vision flourished beyond the walls of his past. Jake's smile was one of genuine fulfillment as he stepped back, realizing that the work was just beginning. His sketchbook was no longer a tomb of yesteryears but a treasure trove of potential. A map charting new territories he would explore alongside his newfound allies. Through a long journey of overcoming, confronting, and transforming, Jake had not only reclaimed his voice but discovered an intrinsic purpose worth cherishing. This moment was not an ending but the dawn of an entirely new chapter, woven with the threads of connection he was destined to nurture and expand. Now more than ever, he understood that while the path of growth might ebb and flow, his achievements would shine brightest when shared. You need to subscribe now to witness the unfolding of transformative journeys. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and illuminate the path for more stories of personal growth. Comment with your insights and theories about Jake's incredible journey, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.